Hi guys, my name is Achilesha Anichewe and welcome to Econ Asia, where I explain economics in the simplest way possible. With that being said, let's get started. So I am sure you've seen from the title that in this video we are going to be doing elasticity. Elasticity. Okay, so I hope you can see that. Okay. So we won't really go much into detail into the calculations. This is more of just introducing the topic so that you just know what elasticity is all about. So elasticity is simply the responsiveness of one variable to the change in another variable. So to simplify that, let's say for example, from our supply and demand, we know that when the price increases, the quantity demanded reduces, right? Okay. So with elasticity, we're going to know by what percentage or by how much will that quantity reduce when the price increases. Let's say when the price increases by 1%, by how much will the quantity demanded reduce? So that's what elasticity is all about. It's the responsiveness of one variable to the change in the other variable. That's the definition of elasticity. So the formula, let me just get a marker. The formula for elasticity is, so elasticity is equal to percentage change. So this triangle just represents change. So percentage change of the dependent variable, let me just say variable, over, let me just get a different marker, over percentage change of the independent variable. So that's the formula, though we're going to break it down further, but for now that's what we're supposed to know. So in this case, the dependent variable being the quantity. So quantity is dependent on other factors such as price, and the independent variable, I actually didn't write it right. Independent. So the independent variable, like in our earlier example, being price. Okay, so that's the formula for elasticity. So we're going to break it down further as we go on. Okay, so next we come to the types of elasticity. So types, I'll just write types since we know the topic we're talking about. So yeah, types of elasticity. So the first one is the price. I don't know why my markers keep dying on. Okay, so the first one is the price elasticity. Okay, I won't write it in full because of space. So price elasticity of demand. So that's the first one, price elasticity of demand. The second one is the income elasticity of demand. That's the second one. The third one is cross price elasticity of demand. And the fourth one is the price elasticity of supply. So these are the four types of elasticities. Okay, so next we're going to start going to these types of elasticity to explain a bit more about them. So with the first one, which is the price, okay, this looks like it's one word, like it's one letter, sorry. This is R. Again, I have a terrible handwriting, so please, hopefully you just get what I'm saying. That would be so much better. Okay. So with the first one, the price elasticity of demand. This simply looks at how the quantity demanded changes when the price changes. That's what it looks at, okay? So let's say, for example, the price of Milli Meal. Should I use Milli Meal? Okay, yeah. Let's say the price of Milli Meal increases from, for example, say, let's say from 130 to 150. So when it increases, we know that the demand is going to reduce from basic supply and demand. But we want to know by how much will it reduce. So that's what we're going to deal with here. Okay. And in the second one, which is the income elasticity of demand, it looks at your income, how much you're earning. So what happens to the quantity of the goods you demand when your income changes? Could be when you get maybe a bonus, your income increases, or maybe let's say your income reduces. You are dropped to, let's say, a lower position. So what happens when your income changes? That's what we're going to look at here. how the quantity demanded will change when the income changes. That's on income elasticity of demand. Okay, so the third type is a cross price elasticity of demand. So with the cross price elasticity of demand is simply relating two goods. So you're going to look at how the price of one good affects the quantity demanded of the other good. So when we reach this part, we're going to be able to know which goods are substitute goods, which ones are complement goods, and how we can tell just by looking at their elasticity. So it's really interesting. So that's on cross price elasticity of demand. You're looking at two different goods and how the price of one affects the quantity demanded of the other good. The fourth one, or the last one, is price elasticity of supply. Basically like this, except we're not looking at quantity demanded. We're going to look at how a price change affects the supply. So that's on this. How a price change affects the quantity supplied. So that's on price elasticity of supply. So these are basically the four types of elasticities that we're mainly going to be looking at. So yes, let me just quickly erase this and we go to the next thing. So next we're going to come to the formulas. So I hope you remember that we said the formula for elasticity is equal to percentage change, that's percentage change in the dependent variable over percentage change in the independent variable. Independent variable. So this is what we said our formula is. So now we're going to break it down. Okay, so you can just keep this formula in mind because due to space, I'll have to erase it. So it's just percentage change of the dependent variable over percentage change of the independent variable. So there are two formulas you can use depending on the question. The first one is the point elasticity. So this is just simply elasticity at a particular point. Okay, my markers are still dying on me. So it's simply elasticity at a particular point. Let's say, for example, you have a curve. Oh, this is really bent. You have price, you have quantity, and you have your demand curve like that. And then you want to find elasticity maybe at this point. So the formula I'm about to write down is the formula you use. My markers, okay. So elasticity is equal to change in quantity over change in price times P over Q. Okay, so this is the formula you use for point elasticity. Okay, so I'm sure you've noticed from this that since we know that our Q is on the x-axis and our P is on the y-axis, so this is more like the inverse of the gradient, this part here, more like the inverse of the gradient. And then this is the price at the particular point you're finding and the quantity at the particular point you're finding. So it can either be, maybe you're dealing with price elasticity of demand, income elasticity, depending on what you're dealing with. That's where the P will change, the P. So if you're dealing with income, this would be I. If you're dealing with cross price elasticity, this would be maybe the price of X and this would be the quantity of Y. So this is a formula for point elasticity. I would say point price, but it can also be income. So this is just a formula for point elasticity. Okay, so let me just erase it and then we go to the second formula. Okay, so the second formula we use is called the midpoint or the arc formula. So midpoint or arc formula. That's the second formula. So with this formula, elasticity is equal to Q2 minus Q1 over Q2 plus Q1 divided by 2. So this 2 is only being divided by this down part. That's where the Q is being divided. Okay. divided by 2, then over P2 minus P1 over P2 plus P1 divided by 2. Then you can also multiply this like your final answer times 100, but that's completely optional. So if you want, you can. If you want, you can't. When you multiply it by 100, you're simply taking it into a percentage form. While when you leave it like that, you're just leaving it as a number. So that's really optional. So you can multiply the final answer by 100, or if you want, you just leave it like that. So that's the formula. So we know that the formula for elasticity, like we showed on earlier, is that elasticity is equal to percentage change in the dependent variable, which in this case is quantity, because quantity is being dependent on price, over the percentage change in the independent variable, which is this, the price. So this is the arc or midpoint formula. So this formula also applies to the other types of elasticities. So if we're dealing with income elasticity, we would have income here instead of price. We just replace the price with income, but the formula remains the same. And then if we're dealing with cross price elasticity, this would be maybe the quantity of good X and the price of good Y, or the quantity of good Y and the price of X. So that's on cross price elasticity. And if we're dealing with income elasticity of, no, price elasticity of supply, this would be the quantity supplied. So, but then the formula remains the same. So that's on the formula. So after calculating your elasticity, if you find out that the value you found, like the value you found, so if elasticity is less than 1, then this is relatively inelastic. Relatively inelastic. So that's relatively inelastic when the elasticity is less than 1. So you might have a number such as maybe 0.1. So such elasticities are relatively inelastic. But if your elasticity is equal to 1, then this is unitary elastic when it's equal to 1. So if we're to show the first one on a graph, it would look a little something like, just a minute, graphs that look a bit like this, okay, where the change, so we have our Q's here and our prices here, the change here in price is greater than the change in quantity. So such graphs that are almost straight like that, so such graphs are relatively inelastic. So thirdly, if elasticity is greater than 1, then this is relatively elastic. Simply meaning that the change in quantity is greater than the change in price. So if we were to show it on a graph, it would look a little something like this. So can you see that? So let me just draw a quick graph. So that's your graph, you have quantity, you have price. So graphs that look a little something like that. Okay, where the change here in quantity is greater than the change in price. I hope you can see that this part is bigger than this part. So the change in quantity is greater than the change in price. So such graphs are relatively elastic. Okay, so for the third and fourth thing, I'll have to erase this. So I hope you're clear on this. Okay. So let me just quickly erase that. Okay. Okay. So when elasticity is equal to 0, then this is perfectly inelastic. So graphs graphs that are perfectly inelastic look a little something like this. So price, quantity, and it's just a straight line. So these are perfectly inelastic. As you can see, your quantity is not changing, but the prices are changing. So meaning the change in quantity will be 0 over change in this, let's just say maybe 2. So this will be equal to 0. So these are perfectly inelastic. I hope it's clear. Okay, so the last one, when elasticity is equal to infinite, then these are perfectly elastic. So if we were to show this graphically, these are graphs that look like this. So price, quantity, and then it's just a straight line. So if you were to calculate the elasticity, we can have the change in quantity here. Let's say Q1, Q2, you're able to get the change. But the change in price here is 0. So maybe you'd have something like 2 over 0. And we don't know how much nothing can go into something. So this is just equal to infinite. So graphs that look like this, that are just a straight line like that, are perfectly elastic. Okay, so that's all I had in this video about elasticity. I hope you liked it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it's helped you in one way or another. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching, and bye.